Welcome to the Tunepact Podcast. I'm your host, the punk rock pop, Lee Pierce. And today we're going to be talking record label basics. What do you need to do to get on a label? And we're lucky enough to have with us, we have the founder and CEO of Punkerton Records, Brandon Allen Lewis. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on. Could you take a few minutes to introduce yourself?
First, thanks for having me on. I'm Brandon Allen Lewis. I started Punkerton Records at the tail end of 2020. I, started the label sort of as a way to get independent music out in the world, and I used it for my own, um, personal. I just love music so much, and I wanted it. I wanted it for me selfishly, but also to be able to work with a lot of people. A couple of other things real quick. Ohio State University graduate, former U.S. Army, and I'm a dad to 3 kids, and I'm married. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for your service to start off, and thank you for coming on. I know how busy you are. Let's get to it. And this is going to be the first of a 2-part series because we got a lot to cover. And me and Brandon know each other, and we talk for at least an hour on the phone every day. So trying to keep this short is going to be rough. So let's get into it. So when it comes to every goal for every artist to get on a label, because success, I hate using the term success because it means different things to different people. But in the music industry sense, it's sales or streams or whatever you need to go by nowadays. So to hit that success, most artists say they need a label. So what does an artist need to do before they even think about approaching a label? There's so many things they have to worry about, sales, listeners, their branding. What do you see as the most important things?
Well, I know with my label in particular, I need bands that first off are good people. I know that that's probably going against what anybody else might say, but that is the most important thing for me. Um, and just people who aren't trying to take advantage of others or trying to skip the line in order to get ahead and but after that, um, have your music down. Have a solid repertoire that you're playing live. If you've already released some stuff, try to have your best music out there in the world, so you can use that sort of as leverage. And also have a good live show. That's important. You're not going to sell records if no one likes to watch you play. A lot of times, you'll have musicians who have sort of gained some traction through streaming and stuff like that. But when people go out to see them, their live show is not as as down and as tight as it needs to be. But yeah, just have all your ducks in a row. Have your social medias already set up. Have your Spotify and your Apple Music, go, sign up for the Spotify for artists and the Apple Music for artists, and have everything ready. Have your link tree and have your website and have all those little details, the things that the record label goes, all right, well, they've already invested some time and some energy into it. And, that's really helpful. Having an established fan base already, of course, is always a good thing, but you can build a fan base if you have good music and you're personable and you have a message that people resonate with. So
Yeah, so do you feel it's just as important, not necessarily the numbers on stream or the number of followers, but seeing the dedication, like, hey, they're on 7 different social media platforms. They're posting every day. They might only have a couple hundred followers or a couple hundred listeners on Spotify, but they're putting in the effort. Do you see that just as important as the bands that they get that organically, without all the effort?
I think it's essential. That's something I definitely look for in a band is if they're willing to do the work on the social medias. I mean, unfortunately, that's where we're at now. I grew up on the CD age, and it wasn't as important. There was no, I mean, before social media, before the MySpaces and stuff like that, when I started this label coming into that, I didn't realize how important it was. Even so, I when I finally figured it out, I didn't realize how each platform, like you said, some of them have 7 different social medias. Each one of those is important, depending on your demographic and your age group that you're trying to appeal to. I mean, look at TikTok, for example. I didn't realize how important TikTok was. And admittedly, my TikTok is not as big as I'd like for it to be, but I do understand its importance for sure.
And I, I wish I had the notes. I forgot to write it down. For artists, if you look, I talk about it quite often. If you look up online, there's quite a few websites dedicated that show you the demographics of social media platforms. They'll tell you who uses each one mostly and what time of the day. So if you're out looking for, like, I know my demographic, I don't know how to find them, look up online and do some research. It will save you a lot of time, and it'll tell you where to focus too.
It also helps. I wanted to say, like, understand your genre. Different platforms cater to different genres. I mean, it's not inherent, but there are trends, and depending on what kind of music you're playing and what kind of crowd your typical demographic is. But if you want to be safe and you want to reach as many people as you can, post to all 6, 7, post to every single, Facebook and Instagram and Threads just for the meta. But YouTube is still a very popular platform. TikTok is a popular platform. There's this new, well, I don't know how new it is, but like the Blue Sky Social that everybody is using. Us even, I mean, we weren't using Threads. Suddenly we started using Threads. We had some stuff get really popular, and that carried over. A lot of people who were on Threads carried over to our Instagram and then to our Facebooks, and then, eventually to our websites and to our bands. And that helped, tremendously.
Well, yeah, because it's always good to, excuse me, is post those things. If you're on 6 or 7 of them, do all your metaverse stuff, but hit those other ones, like you said, TikTok. YouTube Shorts is blowing up. It's an important one for artists to utilize because they changed it from 30-second up to, I believe it's like 3 minutes now. So it's another great platform to use for video. But yeah, I mean, you got Blue Sky, there's Mastodon, there's so many, I can't even name them all. But you got that one, let's say you've only got one thing to post that day. Well, if you've got 6 different platforms, somebody's going to see it that wouldn't have seen it on another one. So it's worth the time to put it out there because, like you said, you weren't expecting Threads to help blow up your other social media platforms either, because people see something on there and they want to go check out what you got going on elsewhere.
Yeah, and a lot of times that stuff doesn't sort of carry over. You can post, certain things on Facebook that not necessarily would go on Instagram and different things like that. I do want to stress the importance of Reddit as well. I was late to the game on Reddit, and it has been one of the best places to go as far as promoting for us. And that's the thing is, especially if you're in a band with multiple members, give them all an assignment as far as, divvy it up. I understand that it can get overwhelming unless you're going to get a dedicated social media person. If you've got 5 members in your band, if that's how you do things, give them all 1 or 2 platforms. Have somebody kind of in charge of it, and then that way the workload is significantly less, because I do understand that one post on 6 different platforms can kind of take a while, but it definitely helps.
Well, and excuse me, I'm glad you brought up the thing about the band members, because that's one thing I've always looked at is, let's say you just got a 3-piece band. Well, counting the band itself, that's 4 profiles on each social media platform. Get out there, have the band post something, then each band member share it with their own little tidbit or their own view on it, their own joke or whatever it might be. And now you've got, that's 4 posts on profiles on social media across how many platforms. So each member, there's so many options and opportunities to promote yourself. People just need to focus more on that too, is remember, because usually if someone really likes the band, they follow the band, but then they usually, like on Facebook or stuff like that, they're also friends with the band members. And sometimes band members will also have business pages also, outside of their personal ones. So it's good to make sure you're sharing that stuff. And remember, like you said, it's good to split up that work, because man, that's a lot of work sometimes.
Yeah, and I do want to say, because you pointed it out, as a band member, sharing your stuff on your personal page. I have heard from different bands and different members of bands in the past where it's like, well, I don't want to spam them for this, that, and the other, and it's like, but that's who you are. You're in this band. It's important. It's a collective. If they didn't want to see it, they would unfollow you. And it's the same thing with you don't want to flood everything with everything all the time, but especially the important stuff, new releases, shows, especially leading up to those things. Like, yeah, if you want your friends there, you might want to tell them about it. If you want your people, your friends to listen to your record or listen to your single, uh, the only way they're going to know about it, they may not be following, your cousin might not be following your band page, but they're following you probably. They're friends with you probably, and that might be the first time they hear about it. So
Well, yeah, like you said, there's so many things that you can film too. I mean, I'm getting ready for a show. Everybody likes the behind the scenes stuff, the peek behind the curtain, because it helps the fans connect with the artists. As a fan, I love seeing that stuff. It's like, oh, that, I do that too. It gives you that connection. So they don't always have to be posting like show footage or stuff like that, or this is what's coming up. Do that stuff that doesn't take any time because you're doing it anyways. Film it. It's a great opportunity. I mean, studio time. Jesus, one day in the studio can give you weeks worth of content for social media.
yeah, and if you're unsure of what to do, go to your favorite band's social medias. Now, that's not always, you're not always gonna, because some, like you said, some people are just so organic, they don't need, well, they should do it either way, but because it could be even bigger, but a lot of times they may not. But go find the bands that are doing successful on social media and their marketing, and copy them. Like, they didn't come up with most of that themselves. Look at the content that's on the reels, right? Scroll through and see what's got 100,000 views or whatever, and mimic it. Don't copy it, but mimic it. Something in the same vein, especially on the music side of things. It definitely helps.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you're going to be looking up to bands that are in the same genre as you, some that you might actually tour with someday. Well, you're going to want that same fan base as well, or might already share that fan base with that band. So yeah, see what they're doing. What worked, what didn't. Reach out to them. Every band's been where you are. Everybody got easier ways of getting to places, or some had to struggle more. But you're not going to know the ins and outs if you don't know what to watch for either. So yeah, reach out to those bands, see what other people are doing. That's really important.
And to go along with that, don't just post. If somebody comments like, "Oh, this new single of yours is amazing," comment back. Interact with your fans. That not only drives people to kind of feel like you're more personable, and kind of has them more incentivized to interact with you, but also you can always monetize your pages, right? And you can have an extra flow of income coming in, even if you're getting $20 a month with interactions. That's $20 that you get to throw in the gas tank when you're going on a tour or something, and that's very helpful as well.
Well, and also those comments that you reply to on social media, those are the fans that come to the show and buy the merch.
Oh,
Because in
absolutely.
some of those, that little interaction on social media means the world to them, because they really look up to you. They really appreciate your music. And now they feel even more connected to you. So they pay more attention to your lyrics. They pay more attention to the band and the music. So yeah, they're going to spend more money. They're going to stream. They're going to buy the vinyl, So though taking that time to interact is just as important as posting. You're 100% right.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they feel like they have a vested interest, they're going to do what they can to see that you succeed. They're going to be the ones who are going through like Reddit and go to, whatever genre you may be in, and find that thread. And when someone says, "Who's your new favorite band?" they're going to be plugging you. And essentially that's free advertising, free marketing. And it's sort of like an exponential growth, because if you make 4 fans that you've interacted with, and you might find one that is very social media and marketing savvy, and they might do what they can to help out your band because because they like what you're doing and they like the music you're releasing, and you were cool with them and you interacted with them, and and you never know, right? You never know who might be commenting.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because you never know. You look through and you'll just see a name and you reply back and find out later that it could be a connection that you could use that you weren't even sure who they were. I mean, it's all about networking, especially in the music industry.
I see that a lot where someone's like, "Hey, I had a show fall through in, Boise. Can anybody help me?" And someone's like, "Actually, I own a venue here in Boise. I love your music. Yeah, let's get you out here or whatever." I've seen that happen a lot because the people who are interacting with your music, they're people too who have lives too, who do cool stuff too, and they might be able to help you out. So it's absolutely essential, I think.
Well, yeah, and especially like I was saying, in the music industry and the music scene, a lot of music fans, especially the ones that are interacting with the bands on social media, are also in bands or have friends that are musicians or are venue owners or booking agents. So yeah, you never know who you're talking to, but yeah, especially in the music industry, there's a good chance that that person you're replying to has connections that you don't even know about, but you want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, when it comes to what you're looking for, if a band wants to get your attention, how important is their branding and identity? Do you think it's would you prefer to have a band come to you that's already, not necessarily followers, but you see how driven they are, the time they're putting in, they got a really good branding and identity, and it's something you can grab and work with? Or see someone that's coming in a little newer, a little greener, they're not as polished, but there's someone that you could actually kind of help them mold into their brand and identity.
I like both, really. Bands who come in with an established identity, it's one of those things where it's like I'm not going to mess with that, right? They've got it down, and things like that. But there are times where bands come in where they may not have even found their sound yet, right? They're so new, they haven't been around long enough. They haven't focused enough to sort of establish that identity. You've got, they may have, the best music in the world, but they don't know how to push themselves. They don't know how to, again, push their brand. They might come in with a logo or something that you can work with, or any, amount of things. And what's important for me is, if a band recognizes that and they ask, "Hey, we need help with this." I mean, I have a lot of bands who approach me like, "We really just need help with promotion and marketing, and we can do everything else." I mean, a lot of times they're like, "We can pay for everything else. We just need help in those areas." And coming from me, it doesn't change much as far as what I do for those bands, but I can also, in addition to help those bands find that identity and sort of identify what image they're trying to put out into the world. It's not one of those things where you've seen, where a manufactured band, right? It's not like, all right, this is how you're going to be. You're all going to wear these suits now, and this is your logo, and you don't have it. No, it's interacting with the band and kind of figuring out what they are trying to put out into the world, and I can help them facilitate that, and that's fun sometimes. It's especially if a band's really open to ideas, and a band recognizes whether they're good at social media and whether they're good at branding themselves, or if they just simply want to write songs and play music and leave everything else up to other people, and that's okay too, right? Not everybody wants to do that things, and as long as they can find somebody to help them with those things and they understand the importance of it, then that's great too.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the entire premise of this show is trying to help independent artists because I mean the whole thing is like, okay, they spent hours, weeks, months, could be years putting an album together, and they're like, oh, okay, I'm done. No, now the work starts.
Yeah,
The fun's over.
absolutely.
Now you got to market. And most people are just like, I'm not a marketer, I'm a musician. And when you can help them guide with that, show them what they need to do or help them with that, it's so important because, yeah, there's a lot of, like I said, that's the whole point of this show, or I wouldn't even have this if it wasn't a problem.
Yeah, in like even my label, for instance, we have a set of bands who are just amazing at marketing, and um, you know, some of them even work in marketing, and they've got all these really fantastic things, and then when there is a band who isn't as strong at it or whatever, I used to do a lot of the hands-on stuff with them for those bands, but now I'm like, all right, we gotta show you how to do this, and and I tell them all the time, like, if you aren't capable of doing that or you don't want to, that's fine. Hire somebody who is, or establish connections with someone. A this for that thing. Like, hey, you can come to all of our shows if you could, help us with this, right? Because I understand that things like that do cost money, and you don't always have that. I'm sure most people in the music industry have creative friends who would be more than happy to at least help them out, give them ideas or things like that. And there are definitely resources out there for bands, like you were saying, that a list of different social media platforms. Well, there's a list of different people who can help them on a not, maybe not free, but cheap, and give them ideas, and sit around as a band and brainstorm ideas if you have to, like whatever it takes, because that's what gets you noticed by labels, and that's what gets you noticed by festivals. And if you're promoting, let's say you got two bands, all things equal except one is good at marketing and one isn't, right? They both have the same amount of monthly listeners, the same draw. The one that markets the most, they're more likely going to get thrown in that festival, because that festival knows that they are going to get their festival promoted. This band's going to promote it, really well. And, it's kind of, I understand where the festival's coming from.
Well, yeah, because when it comes to marketing, it doesn't matter what industry. It doesn't have to be any part of the entertainment industry. If you can get your fans or customers, whatever you want to call it, to market for you, I mean, there's nothing better, because I mean, if you can get the bands to help market the label, and if you can get your fans to help promote you, there's nothing better. And that's, like the bands, I mean, the merch, sharing your posts, stuff like that. I mean, that's the goal in marketing, is to get them to do the work for you, because that shows you know what you're doing, because now they want to share it. They want to do it. They want to be a part of it.
Oh yeah, especially if something you do something just so creative that goes viral, right? Get something that goes so viral that strangers who've never heard of you are sharing your stuff. That's the ultimate goal with marketing, right? And then everyone's following you, and even if they don't necessarily like your music, if you have cool content, whether it be super funny or super serious or heartfelt, again, free advertising is always great.
Yeah, there's nothing better feeling in marketing than when you see someone share a post and you have like zero mutual friends. You've never heard of this person and never even been to that part of the country. That's when you know your stuff is doing what it needs to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So when it comes to, like, we talked about numbers and metrics and stuff like that, is there something as a label that you still kind of look at and you're like, yeah, they're putting in the effort, but there's some things you just got to have like a base number. Is there something, whether it's Spotify listeners or total followers, is there something that really sticks out that you kind of use as a litmus test?
Well, I'm gonna share something with you that I have not ever shared with the bands on the label. So it's easy to fudge those streaming numbers. I don't think a lot. I think most bands don't do that intentionally. They have no idea. They find some PR firm that their cousin's uncle knew. And so I'll look at a band, and they'll approach me, and they're like, they've got, I don't know, 5,000 monthly listeners, and then I look at like their numbers on the actual songs, and I'm like, all right, these can't, but I really like the music, so I'll wait, like a month or two or whatever, and then those numbers dip down dramatically, and I'm like, all right, yeah, those were botted, and I'm not saying that the bands knew that, because a lot of them completely don't know, but I see that daily, as far as how to judge that. I've seen it for several years now. I understand what might be so. So ultimately, it does depend on your social medias and stuff like that and your fan interactions, right? Because the streaming numbers, I mean, Spotify, for all intents and purposes, is not a very good metric. Now, it is a metric. I can, if I'm in with a band and I can go in and I can see exactly who is streaming what from where, but from a surface level, it's not a very good metric on how popular a band is. So for me personally, and I know that this isn't the case probably on the major labels, they think more so, what's going to sell. But for me personally, I just have to really like your music. I don't care if you have 500,000 monthly listeners or 5 monthly listeners on, Spotify or whatever. If I love the music, if it sounds great, then that's sort of what has to be sort of a prerequisite. And then all the other things that go into it, how good you market yourself, how often you tour, how often you do go through members. That's an important thing too. If you're replacing a band member over and over and over and over, then you kind of have to. I do ask bands like, how many members have you gone through? Because and what reasons? Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule on that, but there's a bunch of different not intangible things that I have to consider. But first and foremost, I mean, I will say for me personally, how many listeners because my goal, because I would love to get a band that's got 52 monthly listeners when we start working together, and we release a few singles and an album, and now they are at a steady 5,000 to 6,000, like right off the bat. Like, that's amazing to me. That means, I did something to help them, because they clearly weren't doing it before, right? They hadn't hit that mark yet. And it means we've done something, me personally, the label, and then the bands as a collective, like we all did something to get them more popular in their music out in the world. And that's the goal of what my label is anyways, is just trying to get amazing music that I really love out into the world, so I won't say, I mean, it is important. It's nice to know that people are listening. That also helps, but
Well, that I was really excited about that question because that one actually came from one of your social media posts. I think you had shared. It was something about like we see those Spotify numbers, but we also look at your social media numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my friends had shared a post and I reshared, or had made a post and I reshared it. He's like, you have bazillion streams and monthly listeners, but your social media has 300 people and nobody interacts and you barely ever post. And sometimes there is a disconnect, and you can tell, and labels can tell, and distributors can tell, and other bands can tell. When people are like, "Oh, our single's been out a week and we've got 50,000 streams," and then you go to their social media and there's like 40 people there, and it's like, you're not. People know, especially people in the industry, they know, and it's unfortunate. Like, I understand, like a lot of the times that people don't know that those are fake numbers, and that's unfortunate. Spotify's really cracked down on it, and I don't want to get into the ins and outs of Spotify as far as them as a business, but Spotify. There are a lot of tools in Spotify, despite all the bad stuff, or the unfortunate stuff about Spotify. There are a lot of good things. The metrics and being able to sort of, see where you're at and see who is listening to you where. I mean, that's a big thing. That's really good for touring. If you have, 5,000 people in one city listening to you, and those are real numbers, of course, maybe tour there. Some of those people might show up,
Well, yeah, that's the thing when it comes to metrics and analytics. I mean, we almost get too much information, and you got to remember to look at it through, yes, you got to check those numbers every single day, but look at those, 7-day, those 14-day, because you had a dip here doesn't mean you're on the downfall and it's just going to cause anxiety. But yeah, you got to keep track of those numbers. So when it comes to let's say a band gets all that stuff together and they want to put together EPK, an electronic press kit, what do you feel the best way is for a band to do that, so it's dynamic, but it still captures their brand and identity and looks professional enough, because something like that can be, the yes or no when it comes to like, oh, like it looks like they wrote this in crayon, or wow, they put some time into putting this together. I mean, it's a resume for a band. How do you think, or what's some good tips you have for bands that are trying to put something like that together?
So I probably have a completely different view about it. A couple of years ago, a lot of venues here, I live in Columbus, we're talking about, hey, bands, stop sending us EPKs. Literally send us a link tree and a little bit about yourself. Don't make it a story. And I remember getting angry at that. I was like, because I'd been making EPKs and I had been doing all this other stuff. And then I got to thinking about it. And, EPKs were important before things like Linktree. But now a Linktree can be your EPK. Your Linktree can have everything about you in a nice little package. It's one of those things not that aren't, too long, didn't read, right? It's right there. People can click exactly what they are looking for. And so I honestly feel that the EPK is not, at least in its traditional form as it has been, is not nearly important as it used to be because of the social media and because of how easy it is to access. Now, that being said, something like your link tree needs to be killer. It needs to get to the point. It needs to have, if you're gonna have it linked to specific songs, make sure they're your best songs. If it's gonna link to your streaming, keep it at 2, right? Your Apple Music and your Spotify. That's really it. You know, if you have your websites on there, make sure the ones that are at the top, or your social media sites, are the ones where a lot of people follow you. If you don't have anybody following you on Threads, don't put your Threads on there. It you don't want anybody to see that, right? Like, get your Threads up before you start advertising it. And that's what I know I take a different approach, right? Like, I used to do EPKs for the bands and all that, but when I started finding out that venues didn't really care, and that even like as a label, if somebody sends me like these big one sheets, I don't look at that. I click right on the music, and then I might read their short bio, but I don't really care about their bio if I don't like their music. And so, you know what I mean? Because if I don't like the music, or if it doesn't fit, right? Like, we have sort of our identity and the kind of music we normally release. If someone releases a disco album and that's the kind of music they're playing, I just want to get to that first, so I skip all the steps and realize, all right, they don't fit our particular, brand. And so, yeah, I know that's probably not the answer you were looking for the show, but I mean, I personally don't feel that an EPK, especially this big fancy one, is as important. I feel like you could spend the resources elsewhere, and that includes for labels, that includes for venues and stuff like that. But also, that being said, have an EPK just in case, because if you go to a label's website and you look at their submissions, they might prefer that. And if they do, then you should absolutely send that. But I think even on our website, it's like, all right, send us the music, a little bio, and whatever to this email if you're submitting. And yeah, going back to, you're talking about it looking like it was written in crayon. Well, I will say that what is very important to me is make it catchy, make it stick out in that email that you're sending it to us. A really good example of someone who sent me something that caught my eyes, a band on our label called the Boy Detective, ska band out of Detroit. Best cold email I've ever received. They really sort of went with this theme, and one day I'll release it publicly. But they really caught my attention with something clever, and it made me intrigued. And I had never heard them, and I went along with the email before I even heard their music. And I was like, "This is great. This is a band that takes what they're doing serious." And yeah, it might be a little gimmicky, but it stands out. And but also having things written well. I know I'm probably old school in that, but like I want things to be readable, don't send me a paragraph of things without any periods or punctuation whatsoever, and things like that, because that it makes it a little bit more difficult to read, and then I lose interest. And because we get a lot of, and I'm sure that other labels get a million more submissions than we do, but I get a ton of submissions. I probably get 50 a week. I don't know, something like that. And it's hard to go through it all, So you got to have something that's eye popping, eye catching, and make sure your music's great. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. And well, we're just about done here for the first episode. What's some last minute advice that you've got for artists that not even for approaching and doing the submitting, but to getting their shit in order and getting it together? What's some last minute advice you got for artists that are getting ready to take that next step and start approaching labels?
Just make sure all your bases are covered. Make sure your social media is tight. Make sure everybody has an assignment in your band. That way, when you do approach a label and let's say they, decide to at least give you a meeting, like, know what you want as a band. Beyond your identity, beyond your music, know what you want, what your end goal for your band is. That's important. I feel like, there's a lot of times where people want to be on a label, but they may not even really know what a label does. They hear, I want to be on a label, and they think it, and then they really don't know. And so see what you want out of a label, and when you're doing that, explore labels that you've heard or you assume could do those things for you. There are a lot of labels out there who can't give you what you want. They inherently just don't do certain things. And, you don't want to be disappointed when this label that you've been wanting to join since you were, 15 can't help you the way you want.
All right, that's all really great advice, and I appreciate that. And something you brought up was talking about with the Boy Detective, what they had done, and that's something that's always important. Is if you do our branding and stick to your brand. If you're a fun band that you take your music serious, but it's still fun. You get goofy on stage. You have a good time. Use that in your marketing too, and your approach too when you're reaching out to these. Hey, this is why. Sometimes those weird ones where you're like, any other label would have been just and thrown that away, but if they hit the right label, like, oh, this is good. So stick to your brand. I mean, always be professional. But, I mean, if you're a goofy band and a fun-loving band and you've got some, your EPK or your email you send out is so boring and doesn't explain and show that vibe that you've got, it's worthless. Why? Don't bother then. If you're not going to show who you are and what you're good at, just because other people don't do what you do, that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stick to who you are, stick to your brand. And because if you change who you are to get on a label, you're not going to be happy on that label. You're going to end up making music you don't like. You're going to end up promoting shit you're not proud of. And nobody wants to do that. That's going to be miserable for everybody involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Brandon Allen Lewis, thanks again. This is a two-parter because we got a lot more to cover yet. So everybody, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode.